The entire Christmas dinner exploded with applause when my mother announced, "We finally sold Grandma's house." Then she looked straight at me, smiled, and added, "Too bad you weren't in the will." My sister laughed so hard, she nearly spilled her wine. Around the table, everyone watched, expecting me to break down. After all, I'd spent years caring for Grandma while they barely visited. Instead, I calmly picked up my glass, took one slow sip, and said 7 words that erased every smile in the room. "My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 29 years old. If you'd asked me 3 years ago what Christmas meant, I would have said warmth, family, and Grandma Eleanor's cinnamon rolls. If you ask me now, I'd tell you Christmas is when some people smile the widest while sharpening the knife they're about to stick in your back." By the time this happened, Grandma had been gone for 8 months. Her empty chair still sat at the end of my parents' dining table, decorated with a small red ribbon Mom claimed was to honor her memory. Funny how people suddenly become sentimental after someone's gone. I almost didn't go that night. My younger sister, Madison, had spent years reminding everyone that I was the family's disappointment. I wasn't a doctor like my cousins or a corporate executive like she constantly bragged about becoming. I owned a small interior design firm that I'd built from scratch. It paid my bills, gave me freedom, and made me happy. But to my family, happiness never counted if it didn't come with a flashy title. The moment I walked through the front door, Madison looked me up and down. "Well," she smirked, "Emily actually showed up. I figured you'd be too busy chasing another Pinterest project." A few people chuckled. I smiled politely and hung my coat. "I brought Grandma's cranberry pie recipe," I said, placing the dessert on the counter. Mom barely glanced at it. We already ordered something from that expensive bakery downtown. Of course they had. Dinner began with fake laughter, harmless gossip, and endless conversations about promotions, bonuses, and expensive vacations. I quietly sipped my wine, speaking only when someone asked me a direct question. Then Mom tapped her glass with a spoon. "I have wonderful family news." Everyone looked up. She smiled, a slow, satisfied smile I'd learned never to trust. "We finally sold Grandma's house." The room erupted in cheers. Then she turned toward me. "And, before anyone asks, Emily, you were never in Grandma's will anyway." Madison burst into laughter. "Good," she said loudly. She would have wasted the money. The table waited for my reaction. Instead, I calmly lifted my wine glass, took one slow sip, smiled, and said, "That's wonderful." I paused just long enough for every eye to settle on me. "I just hope you enjoy the cash since I'm the one who bought Grandma's house." The laughter disappeared. Every fork stopped moving. For the first time that evening, the room became completely silent. Nobody spoke. Even the Christmas music playing softly in the background suddenly felt too loud. Mom blinked twice before forcing a laugh. "Emily, this isn't the time for jokes." "I'm not joking." Madison rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. Grandma left that house to Mom. Everyone knows that." I gently placed my wine glass on the table. "Actually, everyone knows what they assumed." Dad frowned. "What exactly are you talking about?" I looked around the room, recognizing the same faces that had spent years deciding who deserved respect and who didn't. "You all remember last spring, when Grandma spent 2 weeks in the hospital?" Mom nodded impatiently. "Of course. What you probably don't remember is that hardly anyone visited after the first few days." Silence. I visited almost every evening after work. I remembered those quiet hospital rooms. Grandma hated daytime television, so we'd solve crossword puzzles together. Sometimes we'd simply sit by the window watching people walk through the courtyard below. One afternoon, she squeezed my hand tighter than usual. "Emily," she'd whispered, "there's something I need to ask you." I told her she never had to ask permission for anything. Her eyes filled with tears. "The house isn't safe anymore." I thought she meant someone had broken in. She slowly shook her head. "The taxes, the repairs, everything has piled up. I've hidden it from your mother because she's already talking about selling it after I'm gone." My heart sank. That little white house wasn't just property. It was where Grandpa had taught me to ride a bicycle, where Grandma baked birthday cakes from scratch, where every Christmas morning smelled like cinnamon, pine, and fresh coffee. "I don't want strangers tearing it apart," she whispered. "So, what do you want me to do?" She looked directly into my eyes. "I want you to save it." A week later, we met with her longtime attorney. After reviewing every document, I quietly paid the overdue taxes, cleared the outstanding liens, and entered into a completely legal purchase agreement that allowed Grandma to remain in the home for the rest of her life. Before we left the attorney's office, Grandma held my hands again. "Promise me something." "What?" "Don't tell anyone." I frowned. "Why?" She gave me the saddest smile I'd ever seen. "Because I want to know who loves me, and who only loves what they think they'll inherit." For several long seconds, nobody at the table moved. Madison finally broke the silence. "So, you're telling us Grandma secretly sold you the house? That's ridiculous." Mom folded her arms. "If that were true, why didn't you tell anyone?" I looked at her calmly. "Because Grandma asked me not to." Dad leaned forward. "There has to be more to this." "There is." I reached into my handbag and pulled out a neatly organized folder I'd brought with me that evening. I hadn't planned to open it, but something about Mom's announcement told me I might need it. "I never wanted credit," I said quietly. "I only wanted Grandma to keep living in the home she loved." I slid the first document across the table. "This is the purchase agreement." The second followed. "This is the recorded ownership transfer." Then another. "And this is Grandma's lifetime occupancy agreement." Dad adjusted his reading glasses, studying each page carefully. "What exactly does lifetime occupancy mean?" he asked. "It means Grandma could live there for the rest of her life exactly, as if nothing had changed." She paid nothing. I paid the taxes, insurance, maintenance, and repairs. Legally, I became the owner, but emotionally, I smiled sadly. It was always Grandma's home. Madison's confidence began to fade. No, that's impossible." "It isn't." I looked directly at my mother. "Do you remember when the roof was replaced last summer?" She nodded slowly. "You said insurance covered it. I let you believe that. The furnace that suddenly stopped breaking down? I paid for that too." "The new porch railing?" I nodded again. "Grandma called me every time something needed fixing. She hated asking, but she knew I'd come." Mom's face grew pale. "You never told us." I didn't need applause. The room was completely still. Then I placed one final envelope on the table. This came from Grandma's attorney after the sale closed. Dad carefully opened it. Inside was the settlement statement showing exactly where every dollar from the recent sale had gone. His eyes widened. He slowly looked up at Mom. "The proceeds," he whispered. "They weren't deposited into your account." I met my mother's stunned expression without raising my voice. "They couldn't be. Legally, they were never yours to begin with." Mom stared at the paperwork as if the words might rearrange themselves if she looked long enough. "No," she whispered. "There has to be some mistake." "There isn't," I replied. Madison grabbed the settlement statement from Dad's hands. "This is fake." It came directly from the closing attorney. She flipped through the pages faster, desperately searching for something that would prove me wrong. "There has to be another account." Mom said the money was transferred yesterday. It was. Mom suddenly looked at me. "Emily, where is it?" I held her gaze. "In the account of the legal owner." Her lips parted, but no words came out. Dad slowly lowered the documents onto the table. "You sold the house?" "I did." "You really owned it all this time?" "Yes." He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his forehead as if 20 years had landed on him in 20 seconds. Mom's voice grew shaky. "You could have told us." "I could have. But Grandma asked me not to." Madison slammed both hands on the table. "This isn't fair. Mom promised we'd split that money. I already put a deposit on a new SUV." No one answered her. She looked around the room, expecting someone to defend her. Nobody did. Mom suddenly reached across the table. "Emily, we're family." I almost smiled. "That's interesting." "Why?" "Because tonight was the first time you've called me family in years." The room became painfully quiet. You announced the sale in front of everyone because you thought I'd been left with nothing. Neither Mom nor Madison denied it. You wanted me embarrassed. Mom looked down at her untouched dinner. I didn't think.
No.
I spoke gently. You didn't. You assumed Grandma valued me exactly as little as you did. A tear rolled down Mom's cheek. I never hated you. I know. I took a slow breath. You just spent years making me feel invisible. Nobody had an answer for that. Outside, snow continued falling against the windows, covering the yard in perfect white. Inside, every carefully built illusion my family had lived behind was collapsing, one quiet truth at a time. For the first time in years, no one at that table was laughing. Dad carefully slid the documents back into the folder. Nobody reached for dessert. Nobody touched their wine. The only sound in the room was the crackling fire beside the Christmas tree. I reached into my handbag one last time. There's something else. I placed a sealed envelope on the table. Written across the front, in Grandma Eleanor's familiar handwriting, were 5 simple words. For my family after Christmas. Dad looked at me. You've had this all along? I nodded. She asked me not to open it until after the house was sold. He carefully unfolded the letter and began reading aloud. If you're hearing this, then Emily honor her promise. His voice trembled. I know some of you may be disappointed by my decision. Please understand that I didn't choose who loved me the most. I chose the person who showed me the most. Mom quietly covered her mouth. Dad continued. Emily visited when there was nothing to gain. She fixed what was broken without asking for recognition. She listened when I was lonely. She never once asked what she would inherit. Tears rolled freely down my mother's face. A house can always be replaced. Character cannot. That's the inheritance I hope my family learns to value. The room fell silent again. I folded my hands together. I didn't keep the money because I wanted to win. Everyone looked at me. I sold the house because Grandma knew it had become too much for one person to maintain. I smiled through the ache in my chest. Next month, part of the proceeds will fund the Eleanor Carter Community Reading Scholarship at our hometown library. Grandma had spent her entire life teaching children to love books. It felt right that her kindness would keep opening doors long after she was gone. I stood, picked up my coat, and looked around the table one final time. I hope one day you remember Grandma for how she lived, instead of what you expected to receive when she died. Then I quietly walked out into the falling snow. For the first time in years, Christmas didn't feel like losing my family. It felt like finally honoring the one person who had always believed in me.